Thank you for choosing CTN. And now, it's time with Herman and Sharron.
I love you.
Hi, everybody.
William Federer is still with us.
That's right.
The only reason I changed my shirt, if you watched on the 16th, because I sweat a lot. He doesn't, so he can keep the same outfit on.
We got to get right to him because he's got so much stuff in his head. I'll tell you.
I know. We're just
talking.
We're just sitting here, and he was talking about you. I've got some stuff planned. I don't know if I'm going to use it, Dave, as my director back there, because I plan stuff. But you are so phenomenal at talking.
I know.
And he's literally, his mind is like pushing a computer. It's amazing.
That's what he's saying.
Dave, can you put up his website so that the people that are watching can go to his website? I've got all of his books on here, just part of them. I'm doing this for people that are not able to see. www.americanminute.com. If you can access all of his books, like some 30, plus DVDs, audio, CDs, anything you can get that this guy has got his name on, you need to have it. I'm telling you. His books, as I said on the first show, it's hard for me to give them away. If you went in my office, I've got a whole shelf, William Federer, all lined up, okay? And I use them for reference when I get stumped on something. I go over and pull one out and go, okay, here it is. And this one is, is one of my favorite right here. This is one of my favorites. So if you can get that one, you'll have a good start on the front. He's signed it for me so that I'm not crazy enough to ever hand it to somebody. So I can't give that one away, but get his books, get his CDs, his DVDs, get whatever his name is on. Believe you me, you will not be disappointed, I'm telling you. But he was just talking, just before we started this one you're seeing now. And I hope you saw the first one, because I can't repeat what this guy says. It is one off. Once he says it, I cannot repeat it because it's so in depth. But I hope you watch that one, and this is the beginning of what we're going to, at least the subject I'm going to cover is current events. But share that computer idea that can you go back to the beginning of what you just started talking to us about?
Well, I was at a loading software on a brand new computer, and I went to church that night, and they were having a baby dedication, and the pastor was telling the parents to raise the child in God's Word. And I thought to myself, he's telling them to load God's software on that cute little blank hard drive.
Yeah.
And so if you think of it, we're a spirit, mind, and body. So you're a spirit, you have a mind, which is like a super fancy computer. It's more than that, but it's at least that. And then your body's like the computer case, which makes it silly for people to argue over what color the computer case is. Reds are better than greens. It's like, it doesn't matter what color the case is, it's what operating system are you using. And so God had programmed Adam and Eve's software, so to speak, to love God, hear God's voice, walk with him in the garden. And he said, oh, one last thing. Don't open an email from someone you don't know and download the attachment. And so Eve gets this email, says you just won $1 million, right? Appeals to the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, the pride of life. She clicks on it, she downloads this virus of selfishness. And what happens when you get a virus? It wants to send itself to other computers. Well, there's really only one other computer, Adam. He gets this email, and he knows he's disobeying God, but he downloads it anyway. The selfishness comes into all of creation, Cain killing Abel, animals killing each other. It's chaotic. And finally, God says, someday I'll send a patch, a manual fix. It's called the law. And the rabbis are the computer geeks, right? And so every kid is born with this selfish nature. Sort of like every computer you buy is preloaded with a virus. And you have to immediately take it to a computer geek to have it cleaned off. And so every kid is born with this selfish virus. And they had to say, you want to steal? Well, go to the rabbi. Well, recode it. Don't steal. You want to lie? Don't lie. You want to commit adultery? Don't commit adultery. And so it's this recoding. Finally, God says, someday I'll send version 2.0, and I'll write it on your hard drive. And that was the law of God written on our hearts. And that happened. Well, when you look at Peter, he gets the download on the day of Pentecost. he goes from denying Christ, all of a sudden he's bold for Christ, right? And he hear God's voice, and the Lord's telling people, okay, lay hands on Paul here, go over there. And everything's fine until the devil realizes, well, I got to do something. He comes up with hackers. And he's always wanted to hack in. And so get you to visit some of those websites that you're not supposed to, and get some of the malware and spyware and all this stuff downloaded so your computer goes slower and slower. And so you need antivirus software. What's that? Well, that's going to church regularly, that's praying, that's reading your Bible. And if you don't do that after a couple days, then it says you're vulnerable. You haven't updated your antivirus. It's been 2 weeks. You're vulnerable. You've been skipping your Bible reading. You've been skipping fellowship with Christians. You're vulnerable. But your computer starts going slower and slower because of all this malware and spyware, until finally the only thing you can do is shut it off. You got to die to your flesh, die to yourself. You go through this 12-hour virus scan, and the Holy Spirit goes through every file in your life, finally puts its finger on this one. This file is infected. This is a sin. You need to repent of this sin. And you do. And then I had a computer crash. Somebody told me about the cloud, the Dropbox, where you can save files on your computer, but it's always automatically backing up to this cloud big computer. I thought, someday your body's going to die, right? Your computer case your hard drive is going to crash. But all of your memory files are backed up onto God's cloud, right? He's the ultimate Dropbox. He's the ultimate memory. And so when you get a resurrected body, I mean, it's going to be beautiful, handsome, beautiful, and you're going to have this lightning fast brain, but you wouldn't be you without your memory files, right? You'd just be a really handsome or a good-looking body or the fancy. And so God downloads all of your files, right? He scrubs out the sin, takes that out, but he puts those. So when Moses and Elijah appeared with Jesus on the mount, they were Moses and Elijah, right? When Jesus rose from the dead, he recognized it. You're going to get your memory files, but you're just going to have a brand new computer, lightning fast and a brand new body.
That is fascinating.
I love that.
Isn't that lovely?
I love that, yeah. That is
Dr.
really
Ben
neat.
Carson, a phenomenon.
He is.
I mean, the guy talks slow. He is not charismatic. There's nobody that would go, boy, when you're in a room with him, man, you know it. Years ago, in fact, the show is coming up on our network when I interviewed Dr. Ben Carson, his wife, Candy. But he said no Muslims should be president of the United States of America. It caused a huge challenge by every
Backlash,
network,
yeah.
and especially the liberals. How dare you? What do you mean? They said the same thing about JFK, that he was Catholic and that the Pope would rule him. What is the difference? Share the difference.
Well, we have a First Amendment in America. By the way, I know Ben and served on the board of Regent University with him for 4 years, and I'm very, very impressed with Ben and Candy Carson.
Did you ever think this guy would be one of the top runners
It is
for
amazing.
the presidency?
Yeah.
It is amazing, and he is a man of character, and I am very impressed with his stand on this issue. And so when he said he would not support a Muslim for president that's practicing Sharia law says to cut off the hand of a thief. It's in there. This came from Allah to Muhammad to cut off the hand of a thief. We have an Eighth Amendment that says there shall be no cruel and unusual punishment. I think there's a conflict there. The Sharia law says that if a woman is raped, she gets whipped 100 times for allowing herself to be used as a tool of Satan to tempt the man.
If she's raped.
If she's raped. So in America, we punish the perpetrator. We don't punish the victim. And so we see that if somebody is a adherent to Sharia law, they're going to have a problem with our Constitution. We have a First Amendment, freedom of religion. You're free to join a religion. You're free to leave a religion. Islam has the Ridda laws, R-I-D-D-A, the apostasy laws, where you're free to join Islam, but if you leave, you get killed. Muhammad said, whoever changes his Islamic religion, kill him, right? So how can you have a First Amendment to the Constitution that you're going to uphold when you're a Muslim practicing the Sharia law that says to kill those that leave Islam? We have a freedom of speech, and people can say things, may insult me, and I just said, well, I'm going to turn the other cheek, and just they got the freedom to say it. In Islam, it's the death penalty to insult Islam. right? So Hillary Clinton in 2011 meets with 57 Muslim country leaders. It's called the Istanbul process, and their big issue was a UN resolution 1618. They wanted to stop people from insulting Islam. They wanted these blasphemy laws. It's interesting that shortly after that, she pulls the troops out of Benghazi, and 5 hours into the attack, she's saying, well, it's these people that insulted Islam. They made a movie. We got to stop people from insulting Islam. So her actions after the attack were very similar to her promises made at this Istanbul process meeting. But nevertheless, when you see if they want to stop people from insulting Islam, anything that's not Islam insults Islam. The gospel insults Islam. If you were to go to the street corner of Saudi Arabia and say Jesus is the only way to heaven, that would be insulting to Islam, and they would kill you. If you were to say Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, that would be insulting to Islam, and they would probably kill you. And so when they say they want to stop people from insulting Islam, what they're saying is they want global Sharia law. And it's important for us to understand these terms. Now, another term to define is the word innocent. When Muslims killed people in France, the president says, well, they're not representing true Islam because Islam says it's wrong to kill the innocent. Well, innocent is a follower of Allah. If you reject Allah and you reject Islam, the Quran says that be ruthless to the infidels who reject Allah and lie in wait for them and chop off their heads and fight those who believe not in Allah. And so when it says it's wrong to kill the innocent, it's actually code for it's wrong to kill Muslims. But it's okay to kill. So a practice of fundamental Sharia law. You could go on where we have the freedom of press and you can print things. In Islam, it's if you print something insulting to Allah, they want to kill you, right? The different magazines in Europe where they would print a cartoon or whatever. We have the freedom of assembly. Not so in Islam. You can't assemble. If you're Christians and you want to assemble and have a church, matter of fact, they have a law in Sharia that if your church falls into disrepair, you cannot repair it. And so these Christians are meeting in these ancient churches and they're just gradually crumbling over the centuries until they can't repair it. And also being secure in your person and your property and your effects, right? Well, in Islam, the non-Muslim is called a dhimmi, D-H-I-M-M-I. It's a second-class status. And you have no rights compared to a Muslim. So in Pakistan, if a Christian and a Muslim are in a disagreement, the Christian cannot even go into the courtroom to represent himself. He has to hire a Muslim to represent him because he has no standing in front of the Sharia Muslim courts. If you're in, I talked to somebody that was in a fender bender in one of the North African Muslim countries, and he says that you're told to get out of your car and run away and just leave your car there, because if they find out that you're an infidel and you've hit a Muslim car, they'll surround your car and kill you. And so a practicer, somebody that practices fundamental Sharia law, they think that those laws came straight from Allah to Muhammad, and therefore they're divine and they're superior to every man-made law. And they consider our Constitution and our form of government where people vote and we make our laws, they consider that as being contradicting these divine Allah laws.
Can you tell me why we bend over backwards to protect Islamic laws and the Muslims and kind of throw the Christians aside like we're a bunch of, retards or dummies or whatever? But they have such loyalty to protect them. I don't understand that.
In America, you're talking about?
Yes, in America.
Well, it's interesting. Over 70% of Americans identify themselves as Christian. So you have about 25% of America identifies itself as Catholic, and about 50 some odd percent identifies itself as Protestant. Baptist being the largest denomination, followed by the Methodist, Presbyterians, Lutherans, and so forth. Mm-hmm. But around 70 to 75% of Americans identify themselves as Christian. Most countries that were conquered by Islam, Muslims only were 10 to 20%, but they would have the weapons and they would disarm the non-Muslims. And so that's why in those countries, when the Muslims conquered North Africa and Egypt and Turkey, the Christians were the ones that paid the taxes. Muslims did not pay the taxes. It's called the jizya, where you had to ransom your life once a year. And you had to bring this large amount of money, and they'd grab your beard and slap your face, and they had to humiliate you. And if you ever ran out of money, you were no longer part of the agreement, the pact of Umar, so to speak. And then they could rob, steal, take your wife and kids, and you had no recourse. And so for you to be in this quote-unquote protected class, you had to pay this jizya once a year. It's a very sad part of America's history, but we had that after the Civil War. So Lincoln, Republican, freed the slaves. Democrats in the Deep South passed Jim Crow laws, black codes, started the KKK, and the freed
Democrats.
Right, the Democrats in the Deep South, right.
And it's amazing, isn't it? Most liberals are Democrats. And yet it was the Democrats that did not want slavery to end.
Correct, yeah. The 13th Amendment, giving rights to freed slaves, was pushed through by the Republicans. Democrats fought it. The 14th.
But JFK was smart enough to capture the entire population of Democrats.
Well, it was actually,
and say that he was the one.
It was actually LBJ was the switch right before Kennedy. Right after Kennedy.
Yeah.
So LBJ switched it from intimidation to entitlement. It's very fascinating. So in the Deep South, you had George Wallace, right? Republican Teddy Roosevelt had Booker T. Washington, the first African American to have a meal in the White House. You had Democrat Woodrow Wilson segregating the military. You had Republican Eisenhower integrating the military. Yeah. You had Republican Eisenhower sending the federal troops to the South to force integration of the schools when Southern Governor Wallace said, no, we're not going to integrate. And then you had some different senators, Byrd and Strom and so forth. And
many of them were KKK
members. And in 1965, they filibustered a Republican civil rights bill to give rights to blacks. They filibustered it. The Democrat senators filibustered for 71 days.
And who was president at that time?
Lyndon Johnson. And the advent of television, we talked about how television changed the debate between Kennedy and Nixon, right? Well, this time the television was reporting on the way that the Democrats treated the blacks in the Deep South, hosing them down on the street, sicking dogs on them. And this became a negative visual impression for the rest of the country.
Had that not been available,
right, and
they probably would have bought what the Democrats wanted to continue.
Right, and so LBJ decided to switch from intimidation to entitlement. And he,
smart.
The Democrat governors on a plane, Ronald Kessler wrote a book called Inside the White House, and he said how these Democrats in the South were saying, what are you doing? He says, no, we're going to let this civil rights bill go through. We're going to water it down some, but we're going to switch from intimidating the African-American population with these negative tactics. We're going to go to entitlement. We're going to try to get them to sign up for the Great Society welfare state. And then he changed the immigration quotas to bring in more immigrants from poorer countries because they would immediately sign up for the entitlement state. The European immigrants had this Judeo-Christian work ethic, this pride where it was considered a social stigma to take a welfare handout. And so they were hesitant to. But the ones from the, and so there was this entitlement programs where they would try to get as many people to sign up for handouts, and then they would have the strongest motivation to vote for the party that would continue
They're
those.
still doing that.
Well, the current president has pulled that off well.
I tell people, imagine if you were getting a $1,000 check in the mail every week from someone you didn't know. Week after week, after month, year after you get a $1,000 check. Would you wake up after a couple years and ask yourself, who is sending me this $1,000 check? I'm going to find out who they are and vote them out of office.
Yeah.
No.
Would anybody do that?
Not in your right mind.
No, I'd say, well, let's keep it going a little longer, a little longer. And so once they could get people to sign up for these entitlement programs, they have the strongest motivation to want to keep that person in power. And so wave after wave of the immigration would come, and it would change the demographics for the voter base for that particular party.
What amazes me is the black population in America have, in essence, accepted a new slave leader. It's the leader of the Democratic Party.
Well, there are very courageous black leaders, William Owens, Jesse Lee Peterson, Bishop E.W. Jackson, Bishop Harry Jackson. They're leaders, Alan Keyes, Ben Carson, and they are very intelligent, very skilled, and they are saying we don't have to follow this model of letting this one group be a spokesperson for our race. Where did that come from, right? And so they're saying, no,
Well, they're starting to be taken for granted. But it's like you say, if you're getting that $1,000 check, are you going to go over to this side over here that says, well, this is really right? Or are they going to say, I don't care if they take me for granted, I'm eating very well?
Yeah, well, Star Parker is a great example of that because she grew up on welfare and she was, involved in that whole community and crime and lots of problems.
She told me in an interview that she was living in a condo near the water, paid for by the government, as long as she wanted to live there. And when she finally got to the place where I can't keep doing this. This is wrong.
Yeah, and she started her own business, with the hair care and so forth, and became successful. But she struggled, and I love the testimony of Ben Carson. He said his mom worked 3 jobs and refused to get on welfare because she says whoever gets on, she observed they really never get off. And so she wanted them. And it's one of these things where, a little seed has to break through the soil because, the butterfly has to go through the pressure of breaking out of that cocoon. It's like there's this, but once you do, you have an inner strength that allows you to succeed and it goes back to Joseph in Egypt, those 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. What happened that first year of famine? Well, they said, well, we don't have enough food. Government, take our cattle, give us food. Second year, take our land, give us food. Third year, take us and our kids, just give us a handout from the government. And so they sold their souls to the government, and all the power in Egypt was concentrated into the hands of one person, the Pharaoh. And so over the years, there's been political philosophers that said, you know what? To be a dictator, you need to create a crisis that's real bad. And then everybody will come and take a handout from you, and then you can get the supreme power. And so
And it's true today.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, help me out, because you're very brilliant.
I can't take that.
So, Ben Carson doesn't definitively say it, but feels very strongly that the pyramids were built during Joseph's time for grain.
Well, I can't comment specifically on that. I have studied the 2,000 years and 33 major Egyptian dynasties, and you have to go back through the datings of the different emperors, and they overlap. So we read the Old Testament in the 16th year of the reign of King Manasseh and the 22nd year of the reign of King Josiah. So they didn't have our dating system where you say, done in the year of the Lord, 2015 or whatever. And so they have to piece together these different emperors and their overlapping reigns to go back. And some of the problem with the Egyptian records, they used to take them really serious until there was the Battle of Carchemish. And the pharaohs on their pyramids put that they really won this thing. Well, they finally discovered some Hittite records, and they said that the pharaoh came up to what is today Turkey, but that was the Hittite Empire. And he says that they surrounded the pharaoh. They almost had him completely captured, and he barely escaped with his life. And they're like, wait a second, this is the same Battle of Carchemish, and the Egyptian. And then they realized, wait a second, it's political spin. It's just put in stone. No emperor is going to put that he almost lost and he escaped with the skin of his teeth. So, but when they looked at the Hittite records and the Egyptian records, one says that he almost lost, the other said that he won great. So finally, they realized that you can't take the Egyptian hieroglyphs as a completely accurate depiction of what happened. No emperor wants to put on his failures. Well, what was the biggest failure? It would have been slaves leaving and the Pharaoh's armies getting defeated. And so there is indication that the Egyptians went to great lengths to not have any record of these, shepherd people, these Jews that shepherded it, and that they would have defeated his navy, his army rather, his chariots. And so it's very difficult to do the dating. But there are some leaders that were assistants to those early pharaohs. There was a Pharaoh Dozier and others. Now they go by Egyptian names, but these were, one was a really wise guy, very smart, and he did help concentrate power into the hands of the Pharaoh, and there may have been famines. And so some of it does overlap the Joseph story, but it is something where
Nobody knows for sure.
So you're not buying into those were built to store grain in?
Well, they did have a lot of buildings that were granaries. The pyramids as such. Now, when he said
because he
pyramids,
says they're temperature controlled, so that's where you would keep grain.
they are temperature controlled. For my
Naturally, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots of different pyramids. A lot of them have not even been unearthed all the way yet. Really the ones that we see are the more later ones. And so the earlier ones are more, not today, they're just sort of mounds.
Yeah.
But.
So that statement could keep him from being president of the United States of America.
Isn't
it amazing? It's interesting, isn't it?
I think that one of the things I've found is they'll pick on something. Saul Alinsky was a political strategist. I mentioned how he had been in Chicago.
Yeah.
He said ridicule is the best weapon.
Boy, isn't that
so
something?
this is the same way that you have a kid in the classroom and he has tennis shoes different than somebody else and they all make fun of him. And so this is just an adult version of this peer pressure, an adult version of ridiculing somebody, and nobody else wants to ridicule, so they back away from him. But it's important to understand that when they attack the messenger, that means that they have lost the argument on the message. So when they'll attack somebody's
That's right.
person,
Yeah.
we'll say, you're uncredible, you're this and that. What they're saying is that they can no longer defeat your arguments. And so
But when you're caught in a direct lie.
So when you're doing debates and you're debating ideas, when they stop doing the debating of the ideas and they start calling you names, you're a liar, you're this and that, what they're admitting is they've run out of ammunition. They can't attack your ideas any longer, so they're attacking you as a person.
But nobody's going to buy into that one. That's for
But
sure.
ridicule is a powerful weapon.
Yeah.
They did that with Sarah Palin. They did it with.
They did.
Yeah.
You're right.
And now the one running for president of the United States, the female, they caught in a lie, but it was dismissed.
It's amazing the double standard.
Yeah.
Macy.
Well,
Thank
so
you
good
for
to
being.
have you.
Wow.
Oh, well, thank you.
I wish I had a couple of weeks.
I do want to mention that in crisis, people turn to Christ.
Yeah.
So when we talk about a lot of these crises, we see power concentrating into the hands of a pharaoh or a king, but we have to remind ourselves that God's ultimate goal is to bring people to Christ, and sometimes He lets things get shaken up, so we'll turn to Him.
Exactly.
true.
And this is your wake-up call, because Jesus Christ is still the answer to every need you may have. If you don't know Him, sometime today, cry out to Him. Forgive me of all of my sin. Come into my heart. Change me. And He'll do it.
Yeah.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching It's Time. If you have recently made a decision for Christ, Herman and Sharron would like to hear from you.